In the small village of Saint Etienne, nestled deep in the French countryside, life moved at a quiet, predictable pace. The cobblestone streets were worn smooth by time, and the church bell rang every Sunday morning without fail. The villagers knew each other by name, and everyone kept to their routines. Farmers tending their fields, shopkeepers opening their stores at sunrise, and the nuns of the Saint Agnes Convent living out their days in prayer and service. It was a place where nothing much ever happened, where the biggest excitement might be the arrival of a new shipment of flour or the birth of a neighbor's child. But beneath the surface of this peaceful existence, something was stirring. Something dark, something strange, and something that would soon shatter the illusion of normalcy. The Saint Agnes Convent had stood for over 200 years, its stone walls weathered but strong, its bell tower casting a long shadow over the village. Inside, the nuns lived a life of silence and devotion, following the strict rules of their order. They were cloistered, meaning they rarely left the convent grounds, and when they did, it was only under supervision. Outsiders saw them as mysterious, almost otherworldly, women who had given up everything for faith, who had chosen to live apart from the world. But to those who lived nearby, they were simply part of the landscape, like the hills or the river that ran through the valley. Sister Marie was one of them. She had come to the convent as a young woman, barely 20, after the death of her parents left her with no family and no future she could see for herself. She had always been quiet. Even as a child, the kind of girl who preferred books to games, who watched the world with thoughtful eyes. The convent gave her a place to belong, a structure to her days, and a purpose. She rose early, prayed often, and worked in the convent's small garden, growing herbs and vegetables for their meals. Life was simple, but not unhappy. The other sisters were much the same. Women who had chosen this life for different reasons, some seeking peace, others running from something they couldn't face in the outside world. Sister Claire had once been a schoolteacher, but she never spoke of her past. Sister Bernadette was the youngest, barely 25, and still adjusting to the silence and discipline of convent life. And then there was Mother Superior, the woman who ruled over them all with quiet authority. She was the one who made the decisions, who enforced the rules, who kept the convent running like a well-oiled machine. No one questioned her. No one dared. But in the spring of that year, something changed. It started small. A missed meal here, a sister seen wandering the halls at night, whispering to herself. Then came the strange noises, soft chanting, the sound of footsteps where there should have been none. The villagers didn't notice at first. They were used to the convent being a place of mystery, of secrets. But inside the walls, the tension was growing. Sister Marie was the first to feel it. She would wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sure she had heard someone calling her name. During prayers, she found herself distracted, her mind drifting to thoughts she couldn't explain. And then there were the dreams, vivid, unsettling dreams of locked doors and voices that whispered in languages she didn't understand. She tried to brush them off, telling herself it was just stress, just the natural loneliness of convent life. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Mother Superior noticed too. She began holding private meetings with the sisters, speaking in hushed tones behind closed doors. Some of the younger nuns started to look frightened, though they never said why. The rules became stricter. No talking after evening prayers. No leaving the dormitory without permission. The convent, once a place of quiet peace, now felt like a prison, and no one could have predicted what would happen next. No one could have imagined the horror that was waiting just beneath the surface, hidden behind the convent's stone walls. But the signs were there, if only someone had been willing to see them. And then, one morning, the doors of the convent were found sealed from the inside. No one could get in, no one could get out. And inside, the sisters had vanished. It started with a letter. A single, folded piece of paper slipped under Mother Superior's door late one night, written in trembling handwriting. No one ever admitted to writing it, but the words inside sent a ripple through the convent like a stone dropped into still water. It was a warning, a plea. It said the sisters were in danger, not from the outside world, but from each other. First. Mother Superior dismissed it. She was a woman who believed in order, in discipline, in the power of faith to hold chaos at bay. She burned the letter in the candle by her desk and told no one what it said. But the unease it stirred didn't go away. If anything, it grew. Sister Marie noticed it first in the way the others looked at each other. Eyes that once met with quiet understanding now darted away, filled with suspicion. The silence during meals became heavier, the prayers longer. The convent had always been a place of quiet, but now the silence felt like something else, like a breath being held, like waiting for something terrible to happen. The first real sign of trouble came during confession. Sister Bernadette, the youngest, went to Mother Superior in tears, saying she had seen something she couldn't explain. She claimed she had been awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of chanting. Not the soft, familiar prayers of the sisters, but something deeper, more primal. She said she followed the sound down the hallway and saw a group of nuns standing outside the chapel, their faces lit by candlelight. When she tried to step closer, they turned and looked at her, but their eyes were empty, like they didn't see her at all. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished. Mother Superior told her it was a dream, a trick of the mind. She sent her to bed with a warm cup of tea and a stern warning not to spread nonsense. But Sister Bernadette wasn't the only one who had begun to feel something strange. Sister Claire, the former schoolteacher, started acting differently. She became withdrawn, speaking only when necessary, and always with a strange intensity. She began spending hours alone in the library, poring over old religious texts that hadn't been touched in years. When Sister Marie asked what she was looking for, she only replied, "The truth," and refused to say more. Then there were the arguments. Small at first, disagreements over chores, over who had taken the last of the bread, over who had forgotten to light the candles for evening prayers. But soon, the fights became more personal. Sister Bernadette accused Sister Claire of hiding something. Sister Claire accused Sister Marie of being weak-willed, of not understanding what was happening around them. And Mother Superior, once the calm center of their world, began to lose her temper more often, snapping at the younger sisters, punishing them for minor infractions. The tension wasn't just between the nuns. The villagers began to notice it too. They saw the sisters walking through town with their heads down, their habits drawn tightly around them as if trying to disappear. They saw the way the convent's windows were always shuttered now, the way the bell no longer rang at night. Some whispered that the sisters had gone mad. Others said it was punishment from God. But the truth was far more complicated. Sister Marie, who had always been the most level-headed among them, began to feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. She had come to the convent for peace, for purpose, but now she felt like she was drowning. The dreams had gotten worse. Night after night, she saw the same thing. A dark hallway, a locked door, voices calling her name. She tried to tell herself it was just stress, that it would pass. But then one night, she woke to find herself standing in front of the chapel, barefoot, her nightgown soaked with sweat. She didn't remember walking there. She didn't remember opening the door. She told no one. Instead, she started watching the others more closely. She noticed the way Sister Claire had begun to write things down in a small leather-bound notebook, always hiding it when someone entered the room. She noticed the way Mother Superior had started locking her door at night. And she noticed the way Sister Bernadette had begun to change. Her face thinner, her eyes darker, as if something inside her was slowly dying. One afternoon, Sister Marie found Sister Bernadette alone in the garden, staring at the ground with a look of pure terror on her face. When she asked what was wrong, Sister Bernadette whispered, "They're not real." "What do you mean?" Sister Marie asked. "The sisters," she said. "Not all of them. Some of them, they're not real anymore." Sister Marie tried to laugh it off, to tell her she was imagining things. But deep down, she knew Bernadette was right. Something had changed. Something had broken inside the convent, and it was spreading. The breaking point came when Sister Claire disappeared. It happened just after midnight. The sisters were in their dormitory, trying to sleep, when they heard the scream. It was low at first, like a whisper. Then it rose into a shriek that echoed through the halls. They all ran to the source, Sister Claire's room. but the door was locked from the inside. When they finally forced it open, she was gone. Her bed was empty, her window still shut, her notebook missing. Mother Superior took control of the situation quickly. She told the others that Sister Claire had left on her own, that she had been troubled for some time, and that they should pray for her soul. But no one believed her. They could see the fear in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she spoke. That was when the rules changed completely, and no one was allowed to leave their rooms after dark. No one was allowed to speak unless spoken to, and no one was allowed to question what had happened to Sister Claire. But the sisters did question it, quietly, in whispers behind closed doors. Sister Marie heard them talking about possession, about curses, about something ancient that had been awakened inside the convent. Sister Bernadette stopped sleeping altogether, pacing the halls at night, muttering prayers under her breath. And Mother Superior, once so sure of herself, began to look like a woman who had lost control of everything. The pressure was building, and everyone could feel it. The air inside the convent had changed. It was heavier, colder. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was oppressive. And then came the final straw. One morning, Sister Bernadette was found dead in the chapel. She was kneeling at the altar, her hands folded in prayer, her eyes wide open. There were no wounds, no signs of struggle, just the unmistakable look of terror frozen on her face. The sisters gathered around her, unsure of what to do. Mother Superior tried to take charge, but her voice was shaking, and her face was pale. She ordered the body to be moved, the chapel to be locked, and no one to speak of it again. But it was too late for silence. The fear had turned to panic. The sisters began to turn on each other, blaming one another for what had happened. Some said Sister Claire had cursed them before she disappeared. Others said it was punishment for their sins. And a few whispered that Mother Superior had known all along, that she had been hiding the truth from them from the beginning. Sister Marie could feel it, the moment when everything was about to fall apart. She wanted to run, to escape, to leave the convent and never look back. But the doors were locked, the windows were sealed, and outside, the world had gone silent. The village had stopped coming. The postman hadn't delivered a letter in days. The farmers no longer brought their produce to the gate. It was as if the convent had been cut off from the rest of the world. And then, on the night of the full moon, the chanting began again. This time, it wasn't just in the hallways. It was everywhere. In the dormitory, in the kitchen, in the chapel. The sisters tried to cover their ears, to pray, to shut their eyes, and pretend it wasn't real. But it was. And then the doors sealed themselves one by one. The convent's heavy wooden doors slammed shut, locking from the inside. The sisters screamed, pounded on the walls, tried to break free. But it was useless. They were trapped. And in the darkness, the voices grew louder. They were calling names. And one of them was Sister Marie's. The air inside the convent was thick, almost suffocating, like it had been pulled tight around them, pressing in from all sides. The chanting had reached a fever pitch, low and guttural, rising and falling like waves crashing against stone. Sister Marie stood frozen in the hallway, her back pressed against the cold wall, her breath shallow and fast. The others were scattered around her, some sobbing, some whispering prayers, some staring into the darkness like they were, waiting for something to come out of it. The doors had sealed themselves hours ago. No amount of pounding or pleading had changed that. The convent was locked, not from the outside, but from within, as if whatever was happening had been waiting for this moment, had been building to this point all along. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the chanting stopped. Silence fell like a hammer. For a moment, no one moved. No one even breathed. Then, from the end of the hallway, a door creaked open. The chapel door. It swung wide on its own, revealing the darkened room inside. A single candle burned at the altar, flickering like a dying breath. And then the voice came. It was soft at first, barely more than a whisper, but it echoed through the halls like thunder. Come. Sister Marie felt the word wrap around her, pull at her like a current. She didn't want to move, but her feet betrayed her. One step, then another. The others followed, drawn forward by something they couldn't name, couldn't resist. They entered the chapel one by one, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. The pews were empty, the stained glass windows casting long shadows across the stone floor. At the front, the candles still burned, but now, standing beside it, was a figure. Mother Superior. She was dressed in her full habit, her hands folded in front of her, her face calm, too calm. She looked at them like a mother might look at her children before telling them something they didn't want to hear. "You have all heard the call," she said, her voice steady, almost gentle. "You have all felt it. It is time." Sister Marie's heart pounded in her chest. "Time for what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mother Superior turned her gaze to her. "To be saved." "No," Sister Marie said, shaking her head. "This isn't right. This isn't what we came here for." But Mother Superior only smiled. "You don't understand," she said. "None of you do, but you will." And then she stepped aside. Behind her, the altar had changed. The crucifix was gone, replaced by something else, something carved into the stone itself. It was a symbol, twisted and ancient, something that looked like it had been scratched into the wall with claws. The candlelight flickered over it, making it seem almost alive. The chanting began again, but this time, it wasn't coming from the halls. It was coming from inside the chapel, from the walls, from the very air around them. Point one of the younger sisters screamed. Another fell to her knees, clutching her head like she was trying to hold it together. And then, one by one, they began to kneel. Sister Marie didn't. She backed away, her hands trembling. "No," she whispered. "This isn't God. This isn't faith." Mother Superior's eyes darkened. "You are the only one who still resists," she said. "Why?" Sister Marie shook her head. "Because I know what this is," she said. "It's not salvation. It's madness." Mother Superior took a step toward her. "Then you leave me no choice." And then the chapel exploded into chaos. Sister Marie turned to run, but the doors slammed shut behind her. The air grew heavier, pressing down on them like a weight. The candle at the altar flared, casting wild shadows across the walls. And then the chanting became screams, sharp, piercing, filled with pain. She turned just in time to see Sister Agnes collapse to the floor, her body convulsing, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Another sister clawed at her own face, drawing blood. Another fell to the ground, her eyes rolling back in her head. Mother Superior stood at the altar, her arms raised, her voice rising above the noise. "Give yourselves," she commanded. "Let it take you. Let it save you." Sister Marie stumbled backward, her mind racing. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the smell of burning wax filled the air, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the room, and the sight of her sisters, her friends, falling one by one, their bodies twisting in ways that weren't natural, their eyes glassy and unfocused. It was all too real. She turned to the window, desperate for escape, but the shutters slammed shut with a force that rattled the glass. There was no way out. She turned back to Mother Superior, her voice breaking. "What have you done?" Mother Superior's face was serene. "I have opened the door." And then, with a final, deafening roar, the candle at the altar went out. Darkness swallowed the chapel whole, and then the screams began again. When the candle was relit, the room was different. The sisters were gone. Yet not just missing gone. Their bodies had vanished, leaving only their habits behind, crumpled on the floor like discarded shells. Mother Superior stood alone at the altar, her face glowing with something that wasn't quite joy, wasn't quite peace. Sister Marie was the only one left. She backed away, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Where are they?" she demanded. "What did you do to them?" Mother Superior turned to her slowly. "They are free," she said simply. Sister Marie shook her head. "You killed them." Mother Superior's eyes softened. "No," she said. "I saved them." Sister Marie didn't wait to hear more. She ran. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get out, had to escape before whatever had taken the others came for her too. She reached the hallway, her footsteps echoing against the stone walls. The doors were still locked, the windows still sealed. She pounded on them, screamed for help, but there was no answer. Behind her, the chanting began again, soft, low, growing. She turned. Mother Superior stood at the end of the hallway, her face half lit by the flickering candle in her hand. "You must choose," she said. "Come willingly or be taken." Sister Marie shook her head. "No." Mother Superior stepped forward. "Then you will suffer." And then the darkness came again. It wasn't just shadows this time. It was something else, something alive. It wrapped around her like smoke, like fingers curling around her throat, pulling her down, pulling her in. She screamed. And then she woke up. She was on the floor of the chapel alone. The candle burned low, the air was still, and the silence was absolute. She sat up slowly, her body aching, her mind spinning. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? But then she saw them. The habits, lined up in perfect rows, like they had been laid to rest. And in the center of the altar, carved into the stone where the crucifix had once been, was a single word. Save. Sister Marie stood, her legs trembling beneath her. She was the only one left. And she knew, with a certainty that made her stomach twist, that whatever had taken the others wasn't finished. That IT was waiting for her. IT was still calling her name. The silence that followed was worse than the screams. Sister Marie didn't know how long she had been unconscious. Minutes? Hours? Days? Time had lost its shape, its meaning. The candle on the altar had burned down to nothing, and the wax pooled like blood across the stone. The chapel was empty. The sisters were gone. Not just missing, not just vanished, erased. All that remained were their habits, lined up like empty shells, like ghosts that had been peeled from their bodies and left behind. She stumbled to her feet, her legs shaking beneath her, her throat raw from screaming. The hallway outside the chapel was dark, the air thick with the scent of old incense, and something else, something burnt, something wrong. She moved slowly, her hands brushing against the cold stone walls, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The convent was silent. Too silent. She called out, her voice cracking. "Hello." No answer. She tried the doors, the windows, and the staircases, but everything was locked. Everything was sealed. It was like the building itself had turned against her, holding her inside like a tomb. She screamed until her voice gave out, pounded on the walls until her hands bled, but no one came, and no one ever came. Weeks passed, maybe more. Time blurred. She stopped sleeping. She stopped eating. She wandered the halls, whispering prayers that no longer made sense, staring at the walls like they might give her answers. Sometimes she heard the chanting again, low and distant, like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. Sometimes she saw shadows move in the corners of her vision, just out of reach. She was losing her mind. And then, one morning, she found the door open, just slightly, just enough for her to squeeze through. She didn't hesitate. She ran. She didn't look back. When she reached the village, the world had moved on without her. The convent had been sealed for months. The villagers had stopped coming long ago, too afraid to get close. Rumors had spread. Whispers of madness, of possession, of something unnatural trapped inside those walls. The church had sent investigators, but no one had ever gone inside. The place had been declared cursed, abandoned, left to rot. Sister Marie was a ghost when she returned. Her face was gaunt, her skin pale, her eyes hollow. She could barely speak, barely remember her own name. The villagers looked at her like she was something unnatural, something dangerous. Some refused to come near her. Others called her a liar, a fraud, a woman who had brought shame to God. The church disowned her. She was no longer a nun. She was no longer anything. They held a trial, though it wasn't a trial. There was no evidence, no bodies, no proof of what had happened. Just her word. And her word was madness. She told them about the voices, about the chanting, about the way the sisters had vanished, one by one, until only she remained. She told them about Mother Superior, about the symbol carved into the altar, about the candle that had burned too long, and the silence that had swallowed everything whole, and no one believed her. Some said she had gone mad. Others said she had been possessed. A few whispered that she had done it herself, that she had killed the others and was trying to cover it up with stories of the devil. She was sent away. Not to prison. There was no crime they could prove, but to a hospital, a place for people like her. People who had lost their minds. She stayed there for years. And through it all, she never stopped hearing the voices. They came at night, soft and low, calling her name. They came in dreams, showing her the chapel, the altar, the empty habits lined up like corpses. They came in the silence between heartbeats, in the flicker of candlelight, in the sound of her breathing. She tried to forget. She tried to move on, but the past clung to her like a shadow, like something that had been carved into her soul. The villagers never spoke of the convent again. The church sealed the records, declared the order disbanded, and let the building rot. Tourists came sometimes, curious, looking for ghosts, for proof of something supernatural. But all they found was silence. And Sister Marie, she lived the rest of her life in the quiet margins of the world, a woman with no home, no family, no faith. She worked odd jobs, slept in shelters, wandered from town to town, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the voices to return. And sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and the air was still, she would whisper a prayer. Not for herself, but for the sisters, for the ones who had been taken, for the ones who had been saved, and for the ones who had never really left. Sister Marie died alone. Not in a hospital, not in a home, not even in a place that could be called a bed. She was found in a small rented room in a forgotten town, curled beneath a thin blanket, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. The candle beside her bed had burned down, the wax dripping like tears onto the wooden floor. There was no note, no final words, just the silence she had carried with her for so long. The news barely made the papers that the former nun, lost to time and madness. A woman who had lived in the margins, remembered only by those who had once whispered about her. The church didn't mourn her. The village didn't speak of her. And the world, as it always does, moved on. But the story didn't die with her. The IT lingered, like a stain no one could clean. The convent still stands, though no one goes near it. Vines crawl up its walls, windows are shattered, and the bell tower leans slightly, as if the building itself is tired of standing. People say it's cursed. Some say they've heard chanting late at night, voices rising in the wind like a prayer gone wrong. Others claim to see figures in the windows, watching, waiting, but no one ever goes inside, and no one ever finds out the truth. Because the truth was never simple. IT wasn't just about madness or possession or even murder. It was about control, about faith twisted into something monstrous, about the power one person can hold over others when no one is left to question it. Mother Superior hadn't just led the sisters to their end. She had convinced them it was salvation. She had taken their fear, their loneliness, their desperation for meaning, and shaped it into something that served her. And they had followed, not because they were forced, but because they believed that that's what made it so terrifying, that IT wasn't some demon lurking in the shadows. It wasn't an outside force breaking in. It was a belief. It was obedience. It was the slow, quiet erosion of free will until there was nothing left but surrender. And Sister Marie, she was the only one who resisted. Not because she was stronger, but because she was afraid in a way the others weren't. She had seen the cracks forming before the whole thing collapsed. She had felt the weight of the silence before it became unbearable. And when the time came, she tried to run, but she never truly escaped. The world never let her. She was labeled mad, dangerous, and unreliable. No one believed her story. No one wanted to, because if they had listened, if they had believed, then they would have had to face the truth. That something like this could happen anywhere. That faith could be weaponized. That power, when unchecked, could consume even the holiest of places. And that was a truth too many people weren't ready to face. The case was never officially closed. There were no arrests, no trials, no justice in the way people understand it. The church buried the records, the villagers buried the memory, and the law had no place in a crime with no bodies, no evidence, no clear beginning or end. But the questions remained. What happens when belief becomes obedience? What happens when someone is given too much control? What happens when no one is left to say no? And what happens to the one person who does? Sister Marie's story is not unique. It echoes through history, in cults and communities, in families and institutions where power is disguised as love, where control is mistaken for guidance, and where silence is mistaken for peace. IT is a story about how easy it is to lose yourself. Not all at once, not in a single act of violence or madness, but slowly, piece by piece, until you don't recognize the person you become. And it is a story about how hard it is to come back. Even when you survive, even when you escape, the past clings to you like a shadow, whispering your name in the dark. The convent still stands. The chapel still waits. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, the voices are still calling.